You've been asking the wrong question about life, not how do I make life work, or how do I find happiness, or what's my purpose? These questions assume life is something you're supposed to figure out, control, or achieve. They assume you're separate from life and need to make it do what you want. Carl Jung discovered something that changes everything. Life isn't something happening to you that you need to figure out. Life is you figuring yourself out. You're not navigating life. You are life's process of becoming conscious of itself. Once you understand this, every question you've been asking becomes irrelevant because you finally understand what life is actually doing. Jung spent decades distilling the essence of human existence down to its psychological core, not philosophy, not religion, not theory. Direct psychological insight into what life is, why it unfolds the way it does, and what it's actually for. And his answer is simpler and more radical than anything you've been taught. I'm about to walk you through Jung's complete explanation of life, what it is, what it's doing, what it requires from you, and what becomes possible when you finally understand and work with it instead of against it. This won't just change how you think about life, it will change what you see when you look at your life. Here's the fundamental misunderstanding most people operate from their entire lives. They think life is about achieving outcomes. Get the career, find the relationship, accumulate the wealth, reach the goals, maximize pleasure, minimize pain. Life is treated as a problem to solve, a game to win, a series of outcomes to achieve. Jung discovered this entire framework is wrong, and living from this false framework creates the majority of human suffering. Here's what Jung understood. Life is not about outcomes, it's about process. Specifically, it's about the process of individuation, becoming consciously what you unconsciously already are. Life isn't asking you to achieve something external. It's asking you to realize something internal. The entire external drama of your life, every success, failure, relationship, crisis, is actually your psyche's way of making you conscious. This means everything you thought was the point, the achievements, the acquisitions, the accomplishments, these are just scaffolding for the real work. The real work is psychological development, becoming conscious, integrating what's been split, realizing your wholeness. That's what life is actually for. Once you understand this, everything changes. Problems stop being obstacles and become curriculum. Suffering stops being meaningless and becomes initiatory. Crisis stops being failure and becomes transformation. You're not trying to make life work anymore. You're recognizing that life is working to make you whole. What follows are 5 essential insights that explain what life is actually doing, according to Jung. Not beliefs to adopt, but realities to recognize about the process you're already in. Jung's first and most fundamental insight. Life is not random events happening to a separate self. Life is the psyche's process of becoming conscious of itself. You are not having experiences. You are consciousness using experiences to develop itself. Here's what this means practically. Your unconscious knows what you need to become whole. It knows what shadow material needs integration, what wounds need healing, what potentials need actualizing, and it orchestrates your life. Every person who appears, every situation that unfolds, every crisis that emerges, specifically to create the conditions for that development. This isn't mystical, it's psychological. Your psyche is a self-organizing system with its own intelligence and agenda. That agenda is individuation, becoming whole, and it will use every aspect of your life to accomplish that agenda. Nothing is random, nothing is wasted. Everything serves the process of making you conscious. Before you understand this, life feels chaotic, unfair, confusing. Why did this happen? Why didn't that work? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? But once you understand that your psyche is orchestrating all of it for specific developmental purposes, these questions transform. You start asking, what is this trying to make me conscious of? What development is this demanding? What am I being forced to integrate? Jung experienced this directly in his own life. His break with Freud, his descent into what looked like madness, his years of psychological crisis. These weren't accidents or misfortune. His psyche was orchestrating the perfect conditions to force him into the unconscious work that would define his life's contribution. The crisis was the curriculum. This is happening in your life constantly. That relationship that keeps triggering the same wound. Your psyche orchestrated it to make you conscious of unintegrated material. That career crisis that's destroying your identity, your psyche designed it to force you beyond false self into authentic self. That recurring pattern that keeps repeating, your psyche will continue repeating it until you finally become conscious of what it's showing you. The mechanism is elegant. Your unconscious presents material through your life experiences. If you become conscious of it, integrate it, learn from it, the pattern completes and you move to the next developmental stage. If you remain unconscious, defend against it, refuse to see it. The pattern repeats in different forms with increasing intensity until you finally pay attention. This is why Jung said, life doesn't get easier as you develop. It gets more conscious. The problems don't stop, but they stop being unconscious repetitions and become conscious development. You're not avoiding difficulties. You're transforming how you relate to them, from unconscious victim to conscious participant. But recognizing that life is consciousness developing itself reveals something even more specific about what consciousness actually requires to develop. Jung's second insight explains why life contains so much conflict and difficulty. Consciousness doesn't develop through comfort and ease. It develops through opposition, tension, and the friction between opposing forces. Every conflict in your life is actually consciousness trying to emerge from the tension between opposites. Here's the psychological mechanism. The ego wants unity, consistency, control. It wants to be one thing, believe one thing, move in one direction. But wholeness requires integrating opposites, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, order and chaos. Consciousness emerges from holding the tension between these opposites instead of collapsing into one side. This is why life constantly presents you with opposites and tension. The tension between what you want and what you fear, between who you are and who you think you should be, between your authentic desires and your social obligations, between your light qualities and your shadow material. These aren't problems to solve by choosing one side. They're tensions to hold until a third thing emerges. Consciousness that transcends the opposition. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold opposites in tension until something new emerges that contains both but is neither. This is how consciousness develops, not through resolving tensions but through holding them consciously until they generate transformation. Think about the major conflicts in your life. The tension between security and freedom, between connection and autonomy, between ambition and presence, between power and vulnerability. Your ego wants to resolve these tensions by choosing one side and rejecting the other. But your self wants you to hold both in tension until you develop the consciousness that can integrate them. This is why spiritual bypassing doesn't work. Choosing only light and rejecting shadow doesn't create wholeness. It creates more unconsciousness because you've rejected half of yourself. True development requires holding both light and shadow in consciousness simultaneously. The tension between them is what generates growth. Jung emphasized, if your life feels tension-free, you're not developed, you're defended. You've collapsed into one side of the opposites and rejected the other. Real psychological health is the capacity to hold increasing amounts of tension between opposites without collapsing into either side. That capacity is consciousness itself. This is also why your values, beliefs, and identity keep being challenged. Your psyche is trying to prevent you from rigidly identifying with one position. It introduces the opposite to create tension, not to torture you, but to develop you. The challenge to your belief is inviting you to develop a consciousness that can hold both the belief and its opposite. The threat to your identity is inviting you to discover a self beneath identity that's not threatened by transformation. But understanding that consciousness develops through tension reveals something about the specific structure of how this development unfolds over a lifetime. Jung's third insight explains why life often feels like it stops working around midlife. Life is structured in two halves with opposite purposes. The first half is about ego development, building identity, achieving in the world, establishing yourself. The second half is about self-development, transcending identity, withdrawing from world achievement, discovering who you are beneath what you've built. Here's why this matters. The strategies that create success in life's first half actively prevent development in the second half. But most people don't know this. They keep using first half strategies in the second half and wonder why nothing works anymore. They're trying to build when they need to dismantle. They're trying to achieve when they need to surrender. They're trying to become someone when they need to discover who they already are beneath all becoming. The first half is about specialization and expansion. You focus, narrow, achieve in specific domains. You build ego strength, develop competence, establish yourself in the world. Your psyche supports this because you need a strong ego to eventually transcend the ego. You can't individuate without first having an individual to individuate from. But around midlife, and this varies by person, the psyche's agenda reverses. Now it's about integration and depth. What you excluded in the first half needs including. What you achieved needs questioning. What gave you identity needs releasing. The second half isn't about doing more, it's about being more, not accomplishing, discovering, not expanding, deepening. This reversal explains the midlife crisis that Jung said isn't a crisis at all. It's an initiation. Your psyche is forcing a fundamental reversal of values and priorities. What mattered becomes irrelevant. What you ignored becomes essential. Who you were dissolves, so who you actually are can emerge. The first half asks, what can I accomplish in the world? The second half asks, who am I beyond my accomplishments? The first half is ego-driven, world-focused, achievement-oriented. The second half is self-driven, inner-focused, being-oriented. Both are necessary. Both serve life's purpose, but they require opposite approaches. Jung observed that people who don't understand this reversal suffer tremendously in the second half. They keep trying to achieve more when they need to be more. They keep expanding when they need to deepen. They keep building identity when they need to transcend it. And they feel increasingly empty, meaningless, lost. Not because something's wrong, but because they're using the wrong map for the territory they're in. The tragedy is that first half success often makes second half development harder. The more you achieved, the more you have to let go of. The stronger your identity, the more painful its dissolution. The more you invested in being someone, the more terrifying it is to discover you're no one and everyone beneath that constructed self. But understanding life's two-half structure points towards something even more fundamental about what makes this entire process meaningful. If these insights are landing, that life is consciousness developing itself through you, that it requires holding tension between opposites, that it's structured in two halves with opposite purposes, you're beginning to see life the way Jung did, as a purposeful psychological process, not random chaos. Before we explore what makes this process meaningful and what it's actually moving toward, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue, because these final two insights reveal what makes all the suffering worth it, and what life is actually moving toward. Jung's fourth insight addresses the question everyone eventually asks: what makes life meaningful? His answer is radical. Meaning doesn't come from avoiding suffering. It comes from transforming suffering into consciousness. The meaningful life isn't the easiest one. It's the one where suffering has been consciously endured and metabolized into wisdom. Here's what Jung understood that modern culture desperately denies. The pursuit of happiness is a trap. Not because happiness is bad, but because making it the goal prevents the psychological work that creates actual meaning. Happiness is circumstantial and temporary. Meaning is earned through suffering consciously transformed into consciousness. The psyche doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about your wholeness. And wholeness requires integrating everything, including pain, loss, failure, darkness. If you organize your life around avoiding suffering, you're organizing it around remaining unconscious of half your experience. You're choosing comfort over consciousness. Jung observed that his patients who'd suffered most consciously, who'd fully felt their pain rather than avoiding it, who'd stayed present to their darkness rather than escaping it, who'd allowed their crises to transform them, these people had the most meaningful lives. Not the happiest lives necessarily, the most meaningful ones. They'd transformed suffering into depth. Their pain had become wisdom. Their crises had generated consciousness. They weren't less wounded than others. They'd metabolized their wounds into psychological gold through the alchemical process of conscious endurance. This is why Jung emphasized, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Not because he was pessimistic, but because consciousness develops through friction. Your ego encounters what it can't accept, can't control, can't understand. That friction, that suffering, forces development that comfort never could. Think about your own life through this lens. What gave it the most meaning? Probably not the easiest times. The meaningful moments came from suffering you consciously transformed, the loss that taught you what matters, the failure that revealed your resilience, the crisis that forced you to find your authentic self, the pain that generated compassion you couldn't have accessed otherwise. This doesn't mean you should seek suffering. It means, when suffering appears, and it will, you have a choice. Unconsciously avoid it and repeat it, or consciously endure it and transform it. One path keeps you stuck in patterns. The other path generates the consciousness that liberates you from patterns. But this understanding of suffering's role in meaning points toward Jung's final and most important insight about what this entire process is actually moving toward. Jung's final insight reveals what life is actually moving toward. Not perfection, not enlightenment, not moral purity. Wholeness. The integration of everything you are, including what you've rejected, into conscious unity. This is individuation. This is life's purpose. This is what all the suffering, tension, and development has been for. Here's what wholeness actually means in Jung's psychology. You stop being fragmented into acceptable parts you identify with and unacceptable parts you reject. You integrate the shadow you've been projecting. You include the qualities you've been denying. You accept the totality of what you are, light and dark, strength and weakness, conscious and unconscious, as necessary aspects of a complete human being. Wholeness doesn't mean you become perfect. It means you become integrated. You're not trying to eliminate your darkness. You're bringing it into consciousness so it stops acting out unconsciously. You're not trying to transcend your humanity. You're trying to fully inhabit it, all of it, without rejecting the parts that don't fit your idealized self-image. This is radically different from what most spiritual and religious traditions teach. They tell you to become better, purer, more enlightened. Jung says, become more whole, include more, integrate more, accept more. The goal isn't ascending beyond your humanity, but descending fully into it, claiming all the aspects you've disowned. Jung emphasized, the self you think you should be is preventing you from becoming the self you actually are. Your idealized self-image, the perfect person you're trying to become, is actually an obstacle to wholeness, because that idealized image requires you to reject whatever doesn't match it. And rejection of self creates shadow, which creates unconsciousness, which prevents wholeness. Individuation is the process of integrating what you've rejected until there's nothing left unconscious. You're not becoming someone new. You're realizing the completeness of who you've always been beneath the fragmentation. The parts you thought were separate were always one. The darkness you thought was enemy was always part of the whole. The qualities you thought were unacceptable were always necessary to your completeness. This is why Jung said the second half of life is about becoming whole rather than becoming successful. Success requires presenting certain parts and hiding others. Wholeness requires integrating all parts into conscious awareness. Success is fragmented. Wholeness is integrated, and only wholeness brings the deep satisfaction that success never could. But here's what's challenging about this goal. Wholeness requires giving up the fantasy of who you think you should be. It requires accepting who you actually are, complete with flaws, darkness, limitations, and humanity. It requires loving yourself, not despite your imperfections, but because your imperfections are part of your completeness. Jung discovered that people reach a point where they have to choose. Keep pursuing the idealized self-image and remain fragmented, or release the idealized image and become whole. Most people can't make that choice because releasing the idealized self feels like giving up on being good. But Jung would say, you're not giving up on being good. You're giving up on the illusion that goodness means rejecting half of yourself. Life is moving you toward this wholeness, whether you cooperate or not. Every crisis is dismantling false identity. Every suffering is integrating rejected material. Every failure is teaching you that you're more than your successes. The only question is whether you resist this process or participate in it consciously. Let me bring Jung's explanation of life together. Life is the psyche's process of becoming conscious. You're not having experiences, your consciousness using experiences to develop itself. Consciousness develops through opposition and tension. Holding opposites generates the consciousness that transcends them. Life has two halves with opposite purposes. First half builds ego. Second half transcends it. Meaning comes from suffering consciously endured. Transformed pain becomes wisdom and depth. And life's goal is wholeness, not perfection. Integrating everything you are, including what you've rejected. Jung would say, once you understand this, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start recognizing, this is me happening. You stop trying to make life work and start working with what life is actually doing. You stop resisting your development and start participating in it. Life isn't asking you to achieve outcomes. It's asking you to become conscious. It's not testing you to see if you're worthy. It's developing you into wholeness. It's not punishing you with suffering. It's using suffering to transform you. Everything that happens is in service of this process. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is random. Nothing is meaningless. The question isn't, what's my purpose? The purpose is individuation, becoming consciously whole. The question is, are you resisting this process or participating in it? Are you fighting what's trying to develop you or working with it? Are you avoiding the tension, the suffering, the transformation? Or are you consciously engaging with the curriculum your psyche has designed specifically for your development? Jung discovered, you can't escape this process. Life will individuate you whether you cooperate or not. The only choice is whether you do it consciously or unconsciously. Consciously means less suffering because you're not resisting. The unconsciously means maximum suffering because you're fighting every developmental demand your psyche makes. If you're ready to stop seeing life as random events to control and start recognizing it as purposeful process to participate in, Jung would tell you, this shift doesn't happen through understanding alone. It happens through application. You have to start seeing your life differently. Every problem is curriculum. Every tension is developmental. Every crisis as initiation. Every suffering is transformation. Every failure is teaching. Start today with one practice. When something difficult happens, pause before reacting. Ask, what is this trying to make me conscious of? What development is this demanding? What am I being invited to integrate? Not as spiritual bypassing, but as genuine inquiry into the purposeful nature of this experience. Stop organizing your life around avoiding suffering and start organizing it around becoming conscious. Stop pursuing happiness as the goal and start pursuing wholeness. Stop trying to become who you think you should be and start discovering who you actually are beneath all the construction. Life is not your enemy. It's your teacher. Your psyche is not torturing you. It's developing you. Your suffering is not meaningless. It's the raw material for consciousness. Your crisis is not failure. It's initiation. Everything that happens is part of a purposeful process moving you toward wholeness. Trust that process. Work with it. Stop resisting what's trying to develop you. Because Jung was right. Life explained is simple. You are consciousness becoming conscious of itself through experience. That's it. That's what life is doing. Everything else is just details of how that process unfolds. The question is, will you participate consciously or unconsciously? Choose consciously. Life becomes infinitely easier when you work with what it's actually doing instead of fighting it. If you're ready to see your life as purposeful psychological process instead of random chaos, subscribe to this channel. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.